If there are prophecies, they will be brought to nothing. If tongues, they will cease. If knowledge, it will be brought to nothing. For we know partially and prophesy partially. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I used to talk as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. When I became a man, an adult, I put away childish things. At present, we see indistinctly, as in a mirror, but then face to face. At present, I know partially, then I shall know fully, as I am fully known. So faith, hope, and love remain, these three. But the greatest of these is love. I'm going to ask you to write down some questions for you to reflect on later. What do you think Paul's point is in verses 1 to 3? What do you think Paul's point is in verses 1 to 3? What have you done, or do you do, that has become a substitute for really loving others? What have you done, or do you do, that has become a substitute for really loving others? Reading over verses 4 to 8, the first sentence of verse 8, in what ways has God loved you as described here? Reading over verses 4 to the beginning of 8, in what ways has God loved you as described here? What have you done recently that is an example of what this love is or is not? What have you done recently that is an example of what this love is or is not? And the last question for now, how are you becoming more of a lover of others as St. Paul describes love? How are you becoming more of a lover of others as Paul describes love? Just checking, are you breathing? Are you breathing in deeply and breathing out completely? Our seminarian Dalton recently talked to you about vocations. Hopefully I'm not going to be repeating. I suspect he presented possible vocations as priesthood, married life, religious life, or single life. Discerning vocation involves searching for the deepest pull of your heart. It means becoming aware of being drawn to a particular way of life that you recognize as a call from God. It involves looking at all of your life, relationships, work, leisure, private life, everything and everyone in our lives. Vocation means seeing and admitting to ourselves that God's hands are moving us to do His work, especially helping others. Discerning vocations requires looking at our gifts and talents honestly. They are gifts from God. Vocation is a call from God to each of us to become signs and witnesses of His love through our unique God-given gifts. What is very important to remember is that no vocation is superior to others. Each leads to a way of life whereby we serve God and others as Jesus taught us to love and serve. Now I have some questions on vocations. First, have you asked your parents how they knew they were called to married life? Have you asked your parents how they knew they were called to married life? What about a priest? Have you asked any priest how he recognized the call to the priesthood? What about a priest? Have you asked any priest how he recognized his call to the priesthood? Have you ever asked the same question of a single person? Another question. What would it mean to you to say, I recognize this as a call from God? How would you know with certainty that this draw, this pull, comes from God? What would it mean to you to say, I recognize this as a call from God? How would you know with certainty that this draw, this pull, comes from God? Our gifts can set us apart from others. With what gifts has God blessed you? Our gifts can set us apart from others. With what gifts has God blessed you? Be sure you share with whoever is in your house to share with later, and also journal your thoughts. Just a little, my background is an introduction into single life. I was in the convent for a number of years. I received a good education, especially a good religious education. Now that I have lived the single life even longer than the religious life, and I'll talk more about that later. So the single life. Have you ever thought about the reality that Jesus was single? Some choose the single life as a vocation. However, the majority of those in single life came to be there through circumstances: death of a spouse, divorce, physical or mental problems. I'm sure you can think of many other examples. The single life can be permanent or temporary. I embrace my single vocation. However, if I met some man who totally swept me off my feet and I fell deeply in love, I could and would be free to enter married life. As with other vocations, the single life brings both challenges and blessings. Looking at the challenges. The first challenge that comes to mind, the first challenge that comes to the mind of many when they hear that I am single, is the difficulty of living a chaste life. It is true, single Catholic people are expected to love those in their lives without sexual intercourse. This would be difficult at any period of history, but it can be even more difficult in our times, when sex outside marriage is socially acceptable. Many people feel that those who are single have to be sad, lonely, feel unfulfilled, incomplete, and may confront us single people about this. Sometimes people think the single person is just carefree and leads lives without problems. So with little consideration of circumstances, an expectation can be put on the single person that because he or she has no commitment, is carefree, the uncommitted person is expected to pick up certain hardships, taking care of elderly parents or other sick members, help with the majority of family financial burdens, or even assume numerous parish tasks. I feel the single life is not valued as a vocation in the church. Most often married life, priesthood, or religious life are considered in discernment, but not the single life. Still, if you think about it, many Catholic saints lived single lives. Now looking at the blessings. Not having family or priesthood responsibilities opens one's life to total commitment and dedication to whatever ministry a single person feels called. I have been free to share my talents and have been dedicated to jobs and professions and to the church. I have been involved in community organizations. Would I have been able to give of myself and my time as freely as generously if I had been married? Would Hector, coordinator of religious education here, be able to do all he does if he had family and children? Could he provide financially for a family on his salary? Loneliness and intimacy are realities that every human being must strive to balance. There can be periods of uncertainty and pain. There can be periods of uncertainty and pain, feelings of isolation in any vocation. However, while living as a single woman, I have learned to turn to God in these difficult times and let go, trusting and knowing that God is with me and within me. When I do this, the loneliness most often becomes a blessing. Sounds unreal, but real for me. A single person can comfortably choose to set aside time for daily prayer and solitude, for spiritual retreats. As a matter of fact, while you will be watching this, I will be away at an 8-day silent retreat. It is rare that priests or married people are able to experience this privilege. Single people can and do commit themselves in a variety of meaningful, loving relationships with family, friends, peers, co-workers. I know I am loved, and I try to let others know I love them. God has richly blessed me. A couple of other thoughts for single people. It's important to have close relationships, including with children, through babysitting, like nieces and nephews, teaching, school, religious education, sewing, volunteering, coaching sports. I can go on and on. But to have children in your family, relationships with children. Close friends are also really important, including friends of the opposite sex. Earlier I said I would get back to my background. Already I pointed out the rich education I received. I appreciate my many ministries I experienced as a sister. I am happy for my years in the convent. However, my relationship with Jesus has deepened notably as a single person. I value my God-given gifts and the luxury of being able to use them more generously as a single person. I know I have personally and spiritually grown and developed in this way of life. I love knowing that I have time to be with Jesus each day. Through these times, I have come to appreciate the many ways God comes to me and how God works through me to touch others. And finally, God has blessed me richly with young friends. All vocations. My vocation, and I'm saying that for all of us, whatever vocation we have, as a human being, is to imitate God in being a life giver, no matter what the vocation is. God's plan is that all might have life and life to the full. God calls each of us to be a part of that plan. Becoming a life giver brings us happiness. In preparing to be with you, I realize more deeply than ever that these single years have been the happiest of my life. This preparation has also deepened my appreciation that my happiness has come from accepting God and others more and more into my life. And the important thing about that is, this is true, whatever vocation we choose. And some thoughts. I do not know, but I deeply encourage you to listen to God in your lives, to keep God in your lives. Trust God, talk with God, listen to God. Also, our church is not perfect, but again, I deeply encourage you to stay close to the church, to others in your life. Help out wherever you are drawn to help. Love your family and friends. Forgive. There is love, peace, and happiness in our world. Pay it forward. In doing this, you will be living the life Christ calls you to live. Your love, peace, and happiness will deepen. Again, this can happen in whatever vocation you choose. Our closing prayer is from Pedro Arrupe, who was a Jesuit, like our Pope is. And he led the Jesuit community for many years. And the prayer is, nothing is more practical than finding God. That is, than falling in love in a quiet, absolute, final way. In a quiet, absolute, final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you up out of bed in the morning, what you will do with your evenings, how you spend your weekend, what you read, what you know, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. So I encourage you to look over those questions, pray over those questions, and share with someone who is important in your life the answers that you come up with. Thank you for this time, and God bless you.